IVM.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 109 of Shunya One. We have a really amazing conversation in front of us. We have Pamit Anand. Pamit is the VP and business head at People Interactive. People Interactive is the parent company of a number of different internet initiatives, but I think probably best known for Shadi.com. What an interesting conversation we have about the ins and outs of the matrimonial business and matchmaking and all the rest of it. Give it a listen. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
All right, Pamit, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going good. It's Dhanteras.
It's Dhanteras. We're here after I reached the studio after some crazy amount of traffic because of the Diwali long weekend that we have coming up.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy, man. The amount of stupid traffic that we have to deal with in the city sometimes is just, which is why people don't build in Bombay, right?
But then we're here today.
But then we have with the guy who does.
We're here today with someone who has, you guys have been building tech out of Bombay since way back when. In fact.
Since the time marriages came into conception, I guess.
No, but welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for waiting for me to get here. And of course, when this episode airs, I think it's going to be way past Diwali. I'm yet to see a Diwali where it rains. I'm wondering how this is going to be. We'll know when this airs and it'll turn out. But welcome to the show. You've obviously, been with Shadi, the company which has started Shadi.com, since which year? Give us a little background on your journey with the company.
Yeah, so I joined Shadi.com in 2010, which sounds it's practically almost a decade ago. Yeah, which is a lot of time to be with a tech company.
In the internet world, do we have dog years that are equivalent in some ways?
Yeah. Right. So it's been a while, and Shadi.com used to at that stage be, I wouldn't call it an early stage startup. It had been, it was funded and all of that. We used to get our salaries on time, and it was nice and stable. But we were largely dependent on our NRI audiences at that stage, because that's where all the credit-worthy audience, the tech adoption had happened a lot more.
Right. The people who would cut a check every month.
Yeah, exactly. The ones who are willing to pay for these kinds of services. And it's a subscription model. So, and the story then gradually, over time, we could see that the shift was happening. India was beginning to, like we say, internet awaken. Yeah. And it's been quite the journey to kind of, iterate towards the Indian consumer from, of course, NRIs are as Indians in a sense, because when it comes to marriage choices, but the way they consume the product is fundamentally different. So it's been a really interesting journey.
And you guys built this, of course, as India was, like you said, waking up to the internet. This is still very much web era, and obviously one of the earliest businesses on the internet. But you also built this because there was a fundamental need in the market for something like this. Obviously with your NRI audience, obviously with the Indian audience. What was that insight? I mean, I asked this to everyone building a product, any kind of product, right? I mean, it seems very obvious here that people need to get married and so on. But what was that insight which really helped you guys go from, that wherever you were at that starting stage to market position that you gained over time? How did this product iterate over time?
Right. So this is an interesting story, kind of an anecdote. The insight obviously was that a lot of the founders and the early internet entrepreneurs were young at that stage, and obviously also looking around to get married. And what I understand is our founder at that stage, his parents kind of asked him to talk to one of those very traditional matchmaking persons who comes with these big massive books with pictures and biodatas, and so the insight was, what the hell, why can't I just put this on the internet? And I think at that stage, this is before I joined, what they figured was that they'll make it an advertising revenue model. We were talking about it, Amit, where what we're going to do is we're going to get boys and girls on the internet to see each other, and we'll have slugs of ads running at the bottom of and this is a desktop environment, and generate leads for other businesses. But then they realized, and I think the insight was more as a result of A/B tests. They figured, you know what, NRIs are willing to pay for this, and they're willing to pay $10 a month, and which means there's real consumer value.
Yeah.
And if there is consumer value, why not get rid of the irritating ads and actually make it a subscription-only product?
Was that the big pivot that you all are focusing?
It was not one single pivot. So it was a realization that you can make it a freemium model. And over time, we then completely did away with advertising on the platform. The platform is completely ad-free now. It's been ad-free for a long time, in fact. So yeah, it was not one single pivot, to be honest. It was a gradual move away from allowing advertisers on Shadi.
And again, in this space, right? Again, I'm oversimplifying it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an obvious space. You need a product like this in the market, and there are many other products like this in the market. How do you make yourselves unique? I mean, it's almost like, Facebook existed when Shadi was born, right?
It's a good question.
Why did consumers, and why do they continue to choose you guys?
So this is one thing that will always work in your favor is what's your stated intent as a product. And Facebook's stated intent is to connect you with friends. And in a sense, we're kind of diametrically opposite to that, right? We're connecting you to people who are not your friends. They're essentially strangers, but they are going to pivot from being strangers to becoming your life partners, which is fundamentally a different kind of connection, right? It's an introduction to a potential of being together and love and romance and all of that. So it's a very different proposition. Although the environments are very similar. So they're both social networks as such. But the promise that Facebook makes is that, you're going to get to meet your everyday friends, and you're going to socialize with people that you otherwise see in office and college. Here you're basically saying that people who you have not met in your life, and serendipity is going to kick in, and you're going to now find romance on the web. So it's a very different promise, and the stated intent is at the end of the day. The other thing is, of course, there are business aspects to it as well, right? So first of all, the fact that you're called Shadi.com, it's fairly straightforward. It's very clear that the domain and the brand represent that you're here for the purpose of finding someone meaningful. That's also why it's very different from Tinder, for example. Right. Tinder's fundamentally saying that you're going to find people to swipe left and right with. It's casual. It's a lot more urbane. This one, of course, Shadi says that the stated intent is that you're going to find something meaningful and long term. So that's where the product becomes a little different.
And over time, how has this evolved? Like, really, how was the Shadi.com of 2010 different from 2019?
Great. So this is a very, very, I don't want to get into a lecture mode, but mobile adoption is one big thing. We've had to change the DNA of the organization to a great extent. We have a completely Android and iOS developer organization now. We do have a desktop team which works in React.js, but that's obviously our product management has kind of pivoted. The kind of form factor that we are dealing with is different. So you are dealing with much lesser real estate. So you have to make your navigation paradigm a lot more intuitive and simpler and all of that. So that's a huge change. The one thing that I would say is that the user attitudes have also interestingly changed. One is post this geo. I'm sure you talk about geo a lot, man. There's no way you can get around that.
1 in 5 episodes.
Okay,
1 in 3.
It's ABBC. It's that kind of before geo, after geo.
Post geo, yeah. It's like like the cry. Okay, sure. So it's kind of post geo, right? So now post geo is a lot more about tier 2, tier 3 India. And why I find that interesting is that we're really, really getting a sense of how the consumers in India look for people. It was a very, like I said, we started off as almost a very NRI high adoption kind of. The entire adoption was in the Indian diaspora outside of India,
right,
which tends to be a lot more sophisticated about their choices. They're looking at compatibility and lifestyle, and when you go in deeper and deeper into India, it is actually a lot more about socio-cultural matching. We've had to, in fact, so we've kind of
what do you mean by that socio-cultural?
I will explain that, and I'm the expert. Stuff like horoscopes have started becoming a lot more relevant. Kundali matchmaking. We're software guys. We're trying to figure that out now. Okay. Like how do you actually build that into your software where you're actually generating graphs and maps and star places and all of that. It's pretty complicated. It's pretty sexy though. It's a lot of fun.
Really cool. Yeah, but I remember hearing that one of the early challenges that was there on Shadi from a user perspective, right, was that there were a lot of people who had parents or who had relatives using things instead, right? Or using the service instead of having the person themselves, right?
Most young adults didn't want their profile on it. They said, hey, I'll find someone myself.
Right. Yeah, they just joke about it. They actually secretly all want to be on it. But sure.
No, but does that, so one, did that evolve in the direction, again, these conversations I had were really early, right? So did that evolve in the direction where it was more this, and now that you're back in tier 2, tier 3, has that gone back into the space where, because if you're talking about kundalis and horoscopes, I'm going to guess that there is parental involvement to a great degree.
Oh, yes. And that's true for India urban as well.
Okay.
I mean, parental involvement in India in general is high.
Okay.
Even I'm talking about my own marriage. I mean, my parents were very much involved. They're not necessarily the primary user.
Right.
They tend to be somewhere in the background trying to. So the way India works is that there is at least India. I mean, stated intent, right? The stated intent for matchmaking in India is about balancing individual choice with conservative wisdom.
Right.
And conservative wisdom tends to come from the patriarch or whatever, from the familial decision making. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I actually like the fact that parents are a lot more involved. It's a lot less frivolous of a decision. And horoscopes, I mean, of course, horoscopes are not consumed in a way necessarily consumed in a way that they show in Bollywood films where, if it's not a match, if it's not a Chhattis Gun kind of a situation or whatever 30 Gun kind of a situation, it's ruled out. That's not necessarily the way India behaves. It's modern. It's tier 2, tier 3 India, even tier 1 India, metros. It's fairly modern. So they're pretty practical about the fact that, they just want to know what the aspects are and
what
does Vedic science tell you about the compatibility of two individuals, and they tend to figure out ways of solving it. So you got to give them a little more, you got to give the devil its due in a sense, right? They're not absolutely extreme about they don't take extreme stands the way it's. Obviously, the anecdotes and stories and films in Bollywood and all of that is to portray it all in the extreme sense, but it's a lot more better.
No, so I get what you're saying, and my point was a little less offensive to people in tier 2 and tier 3 towns than you're making it up.
All right.
No, what I was trying to ask was that, parental involvement in these kinds of decisions, right?
Yeah.
Is that a desirable outcome for you now from Shadi.com perspective, not from your own marriage perspective, but from a Shadi.com perspective?
Yeah.
Is that desirable for you that there's parental involvement, or because you have to treat your product differently, right?
In fact, and that was going to be the tech question here.
Right.
We talk about all product managers and all business owners in building digital products. So they talk about the persona of the customer and customer life cycle management and so on and so forth.
Use all these fancy terms.
How do you actually do this when your your user profile or your primary person who's using the app or the platform has so many individual user personas, and they're literally different people for the same account.
Very good. I mean, I completely agree. I don't mean it as an offensive thing either. No, I see so we do have multi-profile login, and so you can actually. We've had, we used to have cases of people calling us up and saying, I've not accepted this boy's profile, and then we used to say, oh, hang on, I think it's your parent who went in and accepted it. And so we hang on. So we kind of solved that problem through tech, by creating multi-user login capabilities on our app. And so you now know who's done what, and you can kind of figure it out between the two of you. The parent and the kid can solve for it. But whether it's desirable or not is a hard question. I actually I don't have an answer, to be honest. I mean, parents are a very, very high-paying user segment. Right? They are dead serious about getting their kids married. The kids tend to be a little busy. Right, to say the least. And they also tend to be a little more unrealistic at times, kids. They're not necessarily grounded in the reality of what they need to be going after in terms of finding a life partner. So they're not necessarily undesirable. But then it's hard to answer. I mean, we are mass market, right? Shadi.com is a very democratic representation of Indian consumers in a sense, because it's one of the older products that we brought out. It's one of the early internet products, and it's managed to be around for a time. And the fact that we have so many types of cohorts on there, right? From the very, very niche urban, So like one thing we jokingly say is that there are users who will absolutely need stuff like Gotra and Dosham and all those kinds of data points on the other person's profile before deciding. And there are people who will react to it almost offensively, saying that, why are you even showing me this? That's the level of diversity within India, right? There's this very, very Western Indian. And when I'm saying Western, I'm very westernized Indian, And then there's this Indian who's conservative in a sense, right? They when it comes to these decisions, they're very and the beauty of it is it's not necessarily an economic class thing or an urban rural thing. It's not necessarily any of that. You'll find it in all socioeconomic cuts.
That seems like an impossible kind of divide to kind of bridge, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm paid so well. It's hard. See, it's a business that is both complex and simple in a sense, right? Because I was here listening to one of your earlier podcasts with, I think it was Mona from Airbnb. It's a two-way marketplace. Right. Airbnb, I think, also is in a sense that, but the simplicity in Airbnb lies in the fact that it's a commercial decision. It's fairly rational in nature. So you're checking a few. The house needs to be whatever.
And there isn't that much of a downside at the end of it. You spend a weekend.
You spend
it's
a weekend.
Not the best. All right, that's okay.
Absolutely.
Over here, the downside is a lot more dramatic.
And therefore, the responsibility for us as a product is that much more overwhelming, right? You're really messing with fire.
Right. Yeah.
And so to that extent, it's a two-way marketplace. You don't have any, from an economic standpoint, you don't have cost of goods sold, because essentially it's your traffic that you're bringing together to monetize. And therefore, traditional e-commerce product models don't really work here. So there's a lot of talk on product blogs and stuff about AA, RRR and all those kinds of frameworks that work, right? Like acquisition, activity, retention, renewal, referral, all of that. In our case, we don't look at it that way, because we use something similar. We call the S1, S2. It's an in-house developed concept. Okay. S1, S2, S3. So it's sign up, shortlist, and select. It's essentially that. It's simple as that. And of course, we monetize the selection part of it, which means that in order to the way we make our business sustain is that in order to talk to each other, if you want to chat with each other, you need to pay up. Yeah. So that's the way we are.
S1, S2, S3.
That's it's jargon.
No, I get it. But and I understand why you're monetizing on the selection part of this. Again, how did this? I want to understand the intricacies of how you evolved this. See, what did you see over the years about Indian diaspora consumer behavior that helped you evolve these higher models of how to run your business, how to monetize it, how to, like, what are those, maybe a little bit of the underlying tech pivot, small changes that you made over time to actually optimize this funnel of yours?
So one was the realization that we had that there's simply too many user types. I think you nailed it when you mentioned that there are typically 4 personas, 6 personas. User personas are very central to product and marketing as such. And we realized, boss, we're really kind of proliferating 8, 16, 32. I mean, there's just so many types of them. And then when you cut it by geography, where you go to the south, it's very different. The way they matchmake and the way they matchmake in the north is different. And then in the urban north so we kind of realized that somewhere along the way, I think it was, and data science was, and AI and ML were beginning to kind of find their feet, and we had a fairly strong analytics team which told us that dude, you can't really generalize these things. Everything in aggregate seems very, very averaged out, and you can't really, you're giving very, very suboptimal experiences to certain types of users because you've averaged out based on what India is. And India is just so many countries put together, isn't it? We talk about it in popular culture a lot. So we realized that, and what we said is that there has to be a very concerted effort on our part to try and personalize our listings, So we had a lot of effort that we put into. In fact, we won an award recently because we kind of did this deep learning algo, which kind of iteratively adopts to your selection, your individual selection choices. And we call it the rank score. It's in-house developed by a stud of a team. We have a data science team which does fairly deep stuff in terms of how they figured out how to identify how, let's say, a Hindu Brahmin Mumbai, this Hindu Brahmin Mumbai age 28 is different from this Hindu Brahmin age 28. Both of them having very similar economic backgrounds, let's say, both similar income groups. And we have all this information. So the advantage is that in order to find matches, people do provide us with as much information as they potentially can. Right. So we've got a lot of information about them in order to do a good enough job. The problem was we didn't have the when you use product management or traditional product management, you can't solve these problems because you'll typically put business rules in your code. Yeah. And you'll say, okay, for every Hindu Brahmin, show every other Hindu Brahmin. Yeah. And then after the Brahmins, show the Kshatris. And you'd use some basic logic or intuition and put it all together and you'll get it wrong and all of that. But the moment you started using AI, and it's not really AI, it's more of machine learning, deep learning kind of algos we started using. They started really kicking in, right? So every individual has started having his own individual experience in terms of what he's seeing, the listings that he's consuming. And that's been a pretty breakthrough. It's an important evolution because it's a tech solution to a very, very human problem.
Yeah, right? This has been traditionally the knowledge of, the cultural knowledge of what's a good match. I guess you're essentially building your own Kundli system.
We are
in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And it's not. It's something that we've not fully understood ourselves, man. It's as complicated as that. It's something that the machine just continues to learn. And kudos to the data science team. They've done a great job with this.
Yeah. And again, as people's tastes have evolved, right, with the advent of again the things Tinder and the like, and the fact that that there's so much more places where you can meet people or potential partners and so on, and the fact that people have become less focused on settling down and maybe experimenting more, right? Has this changed your growth? Have you seen challenges in the face of this new India which has emerged, including in tier 2, tier 3? Because what we do here is that people are dating in tier 2, tier 3 as well, wherever you think that's more conservative India, but people are doing casual dating even there. So has that evolved, and are you going in that direction or trying to solve for that, or is it still stated intent of getting married?
It has. Tinder's done a phenomenal job in terms of making it a lot cooler to find people online. There's no doubt about that. And it has also it's also because there's a large population of people who simply want to find interesting people, right?
Yeah. Right.
And traditional matchmaking platforms would have to adopt to that. So we've done that. Whether we've done a good enough job is, the jury's still out on that one. It's a little hard to kind of manage both these ships inside one single product. So we've been figuring out whether to actually segue into dating, pure play dating, where it's largely about chemistry and it's about fun and romance, and as opposed to a slightly more serious matchmaking, right? But it has. There's a lot.
There was an initiative around that, right? Wasn't it? Didn't they start something like in mid 2000s, early 2000s, something like that, which was like dating? I can't remember what it was called.
Our group, people. Yeah, we've played around with Frapper for a while.
Frapper, there you go. That's it. That's it. Frapper.
So that's what. So it makes sense to have a separate product for that.
Right.
Because you're not gonna be able to do both within that same.
Also, I think that the intent thing is what leads to people paying for it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think too many people are paying all that much money for a dating app.
That's so true, man. That's so true.
Tinder keeps reporting more and more revenues.
Yeah, they do, but then it's all globally, add-on, right? It's all add-on stuff. You get extra features, you get extra this, right? It's still a freemium product, right? You still have, there is a free experience over there.
Just like there is over here as well.
Yeah, of course. They're both freemium. So to that extent, it's fair to say that they're comparable.
Okay.
But it's definitely a smaller market, at least as of now. I mean, right.
So India is still very much like people getting married market.
It's the interesting challenge for Tinder is, and will probably be for a long time, in terms of getting into mainstream India. Right. So and until the time they don't go there, and I'm sure they're going to figure that out as well. But going into mainstream India, wherein getting enough female traffic from mainstream India, if they can crack that, then it'll be a serious problem for us. Right now, they are important. They are, and you're right. Globally, they're growing in terms of revenues. I don't think they've hurt from a pure. If you look at it purely from a business standpoint, they've not hurt us. They do have a freemium model, but they also make a lot of their money through advertising.
Right.
So I think from what I understand, I may be completely inaccurate, but these are my estimates. It's about 30% subscription, 40% subscription, and 60% from advertising. In our case, it's 100% subscription revenue.
Right.
So it's different that way.
So going forward, and again, since you're in the thick of how, and you've seen the company almost a decade. Going forward, what more is there to innovate in this space? I mean, of course, you said machine learning and better data and better so on, but how do you stay ahead of the game as a?
I'm going to use Jeff Bezos' quote, being customer obsessed, I guess. Yeah. No, sorry, that's all can. Yeah. So there's a lot that can be done. See, there's all matchmaking, the entire matchmaking industry, right from Match and Tinder abroad to platforms like ours here. The only part of the problem that we've done a reasonable enough job in terms of solving is introductions. We've not solved matchmaking. Right, we've not been able to, and this is true for the entire industry. That's probably the next leg of innovation, and without me giving out all the ideas, but there's an important part that remains after you are introduced, right? Which is, how do you get the two people to feel less awkward about their first conversation? How do you get them into a room or into a conversation, or maybe have coffee together? How do you get that to happen? We have certain services that we've launched fairly recently called select services and VIP services, and they're fairly intuitive in terms of what they are, right? These are human intermediation kind of services. So you actually have an MBA who's going to matchmake for you, right? So we have these relationship managers all suited and booted who'll talk on your behalf to the girl, and then they'll take the message from the girl, and it's like playing Cupid, which is a lot of fun, and therein lies the innovation, right? So because it then breaks the ice. You've got someone who's playing messenger for you. You've got your wing. What do you call it? The wingman in the US. Yeah, you got that.
So there's a lot. What's the Salman Khan movie? The Will Smith movie.
Hitch. Yeah, there you are. Exactly.
Partner is the Hindi one.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. And then you can go. I mean, purely from a group standpoint, you don't have to stick with matchmaking. You can do a lot post having found the match. We're exploring ideas around starting early from dating onwards to post-wedding, wed tech and all of that. So there's wedding e-commerce, which is
this is our first wed tech episode.
Yes, it is.
It's a cousin of ed tech.
No, but technically we now do complete the cycle with everything. Yes. Consumer starts with ed tech and now goes to wed tech and has all the food tech in between. So it makes complete sense. But Pamit, what's the next outlook for for the group, and for listeners listening in here? What kind of shout out would you say if someone wanted to maybe get in touch with you or talk to you guys, work with you guys, or do something in this space? What would you say?
So you can reach out to me anytime on Pamit Anand on Twitter. I'm reasonably active there. You can call us on Shadi's customer care numbers, which I'm sure you can just look up.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not gonna. So see, in terms of as a group, there's a lot of exciting stuff. We consider, so we're a tech company, right? So our biggest success has, of course, been Shadi. We kind of exited the Makan business, which was real estate.
Right.
I was not involved in that, but we've basically, as a group, had various other tech ventures.
You didn't do Roti Kapda ever.
We haven't figured out Roti, but Zomato's doing a good enough job there. So yes.
You guys had gaming company too, right?
Moj is what? Yeah, so we've got a few other businesses which we've already got, and we're exploring a few new. So we are okay. So to answer that completely, we're looking at a few new markets as well, which would we would be able to leverage some of our matchmaking expertise outside of India. And in a non-Indian market, I wouldn't disclose which ones, but a couple of very interesting large market opportunities which are only now beginning to come to the internet for matchmaking. So there's a lot happening on that front as well. We've got a corp dev team working that out. So that's the future.
Wow. So look forward to that, and look forward to, of course, hearing where the journey of Shadi.com and everything else associated with People Group
just a reminder, everybody, please make sure you do sign up for the Slack channel. It's ivmpodcast.com/Shunya One. There is a button for send us your email there. Send the email and we'll invite you to the channel. Also, please do a rating review somewhere or the other. iTunes would be great. Anywhere else would work too.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us, Pamit.
Enjoy this conversation.
Yes, so did we. And we look forward to... We'll never get to use Shadi.com. Well, Amit can.
I could, but I haven't. I should.
We're going to figure it out offline.
We will.
All right.
Thank you so much. This was a great chat.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you enjoy listening to content on the IVM Podcast Network, let me tell you about a couple of things that you should check out this week. On the Empowering series, Zarina is joined by Ambar Qureshi, founder of The Plum Tree and former plus-size model. They talk about body positivity, self-belief, and the idea behind starting her own clothing venture. On 9XM Soundcast, Eva is in conversation with Bollywood singer Palak Muchal. She has lent her voice to movies like MS Dhoni, Ashiki 2, and Prem Ratan Dhan Payo. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talks about voting and acknowledging the choices that we make with a mindful approach. On Pragati Podcast, we have repeat guest Amaya Nayak, who talks to Pawan about refugees, distress, migrants, and movement of people across the world. On Ganatantra this week, Alok and Saryu are joined by Dr. Srinath Raghavan to discuss politics of the armed forces, nationalism, the impact of social media on perceptions of the army, and more. On Mr. and Mrs. Binge Watch, Janice and Anirudh talk about the highly rated show this year, Succession. Thanks, and we hope to see you again soon.
रिश्ते में तो हम तुम्हारे पॉडकास्ट लगते हैं. नाम है फुटबॉल शुडबॉल.
Presenting Football Should Ball, a show about three friends discussing our favorite game over a beer. Sometimes three, maybe even five. Hi, I'm Shiva, and with me are my two sidekicks, Gaurav Sapre and Karthik Iyer.
Sidekick? You mean like Batman's Robin or Van Persie Robin?
No, I mean like Alexis Sanchez, but with a little more skill than just playing the piano.
Ha! Just shows how the best players at Arsenal are mere bench warmers at United.
Oh, thank you, Iyer. But you're a Fulham supporter, so whenever you say anything to support me, I question my beliefs.
Just like how Griezmann would say, एक बार मैंने जो decision ले लिया, तो मैं अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनता.
Banter aside, we will talk match reports, transfer rumors, top controversies, fantasy football picks, and so much more. So grab a beer and tune in to Football Should Ball every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.